Hey guys, in just 14 days, the world's largest arena for sports and collectibles is back in New York City. Catch the return of FANATICS Fest from June 20th to the 22nd, where you could share the floor with the biggest names in sports. That means appearances by over 500 iconic athletes and celebrities from your favorite teams, including current and former New York Knicks legends, plus live panels and podcasts, exclusive merch collabs, a trading card area with 200 of the biggest dealers in the biz, and way, way more. Get your tickets today using the link in the description of this Knicks Film School episode you're either watching or listening to, and get 20% off your ticket price with promo code Knicks Film School 20. A great offer that has been extended until the opening day of FANATICS Fest on June 20th. Again, check the link in the description and use promo code Knicks Film School 20 for a 20% discount. When the world's greatest athletes gather in New York City, don't miss it. Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? It's your boy, Jonathan Macri, with you for another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. And yes, it is that time of year, everybody's favorite time of year. It is conch season, which means I have, of course, here with Jeremy Cohen. I will first say hello to you. Hello, Jeremy.
John, long time no speak. Feels like it was only yesterday where we were having a live stream about Tom Thibodeau.
Peek behind the curtain. Yeah. What is it? It's Wednesday, June 4th at 6:26 p.m. I think we're not releasing this too far into the future. We're releasing this on Friday, right?
It'll be Friday. And as a result, John, can you believe what happened in game one? Crazy. What an unbelievable game that was. I can't believe that insert team here did that to insert team here. Just phenomenal basketball. It should be an exciting series. What a sport.
I hope the Pacers get just very badly beaten and bruised. But the main thing, I guess, in Knicks land is if there are any rumors or pieces of news that have been released in regards to the Knicks head coaching search between, again, 6:27 p.m. right now on Wednesday night. And whenever you are listening to this, the reason we're not talking about it is because we didn't know. But what we do know is all about stuff.
All about stuff? Wow.
About the salary. Like,
Jonathan Macri, you have a way with words, sir.
Should I say salary cap? Should I say? I was going to say balance sheets. I don't know why that came into my mind.
I hate the irony of all of this is that the class I think I did the absolute worst in. And I wound up doing fine, but it was accounting, financial accounting.
Really?
Yeah, it was really not.
I'm shocked by that.
I am too at this point. You'd think that I would be able to do it, and yet. When I was in school, I should have put it into Knicks content, and who knows, maybe I would have gotten a better grade.
I took 3. So I went to Fordham College of Business, which has some name that I don't even know. And there were, I think, 2 accounting classes that were mandated. And then I took a third accounting class. I got 2 A's in the first 2 classes. I got an A in the third class that I took. I needed to take one more accounting class to be able to get like a minor or whatever they call it, a minor in Fordham in accounting. And I loathed accounting so much that I was like, fuck this. I'm not taking one more second of this garbage. And so I didn't get a minor in accounting. I have no regrets.
Me neither. And look, we turned out okay. So it worked out.
Yeah. All right, that's enough. So anything before we put up the graphic or any preamble here? What are we doing?
Yeah, we'll take just some very quick preamble.
Sure, go for it.
We've been very fortunate to have a lot of new folks coming to our channel. Welcome. If you've never experienced cap or no cap before, the premise is that the salary cap is really confusing. And there are a lot of rules, and really it's the collective bargaining agreement. And there are some things about what does it mean? We try to do it at a very rudimentary level, but also we try to make it fun because it can be boring and dense, and it's our job to break it down. And because this is a Knicks podcast, we do everything in our power to talk about the Knicks in ways that are financially viable. Now, it's funny, John, I was listening to some of our podcasts from last year, specifically the summer, after all of the hoopla of really July.
Okay.
So it was kind of hey, Julius Randle hasn't signed an extension. And I think it was also like around July 8th, July 9th. And what I realized as I was listening to that is there were moments where it was like, well, the Knicks aren't going to do this. That's not going to happen. We were speaking in absolutes in a way that we simply should not have.
Speak for yourself. I barely speak on these episodes. I'm very proud of that fact.
Well, even the ones that weren't cap or no caps, it was just the general, like, well, the Knicks aren't going to do this. And you know what? We, especially myself, certain of those topics were wrong.
Yeah.
And I think what the lesson is, because if I were to say to you a year ago this time, hey, John, guess what? The Knicks are going to trade basically all expiring salary and every pick that they can trade for Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns. Oh, and by the way, also going is Dante DiVincenzo, and they're going to have Mikal Bridges. It's going to be this, like, we would have said that's crazy. So the tone that I want to set as we move into the offseason is what truly is a realistic offseason. Because I can tell you right now, in 2022, probably was, right? Summer of 2022. That's when the Knicks signed Jalen Brunson.
Yeah.
The Knicks went into the offseason with no cap space. And suddenly, they had cap space and they signed Jalen Brunson. They've traded into drafts. They've traded out of drafts. They've traded up. They've traded down. They've traded left and they've traded right. They have done things that seem improbable or even impossible. So I have gotten to the point where this year and moving forward, I'm going to stop speaking in absolutes unless it's the letter of the law. Because, and you could look at the Luka Doncic trade as well and be like, see, well, anything could happen kind of mindset. It's at the end of the day, our opinions are going to be based in a lot of the math. But I'm going to do my best to refrain from like, well, that's not going to happen. It can't. How is it? Oh, it happened. Wow. Wasn't expecting that one. Damn. Well, okay. That's great. So to avoid all of that, just going to take a step back and be open and let the front office cook, because that's what they've been doing. And they've been doing a great job of it. So as we settle into what cap or no cap is and will be, it will be less of, this is not going to happen, gut reaction, and more of, this is not going to happen because here's what the math says.
I love it. And I will just add, as I actually get our graphic up on the screen here, my only preamble that I wanted to give is that for any of our, new listeners, and maybe some of our new listeners who are not as down with the lingo of the young people, of which I am not one, but I am in my day job around young people a lot. Cap refers to a lie. Mm-hmm. So there is a double meaning to the names of these episodes. And I would just like to put that out there.
Yes. Thank you. It is a double entendre.
I wasn't pulling that out of my ass.
Well, the French did, and we stole it from them. So, thank you. Merci beaucoup.
I could have gotten that one, I think.
Probably, but,
Maybe. We, yes. All right.
Yeah, the two of us. Yeah. Exactly. So here we go. This is the first episode of the 2025 Cap or No Cap.
Oh, sorry. One last thing.
Yes.
I should just say, for anybody, if you're we're very aware of the fact that this is an audio only medium for some, and while we do have a slideshow that we do for these cap or no caps that Jeremy painstakingly put together, and we encourage everybody to go on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel and subscribe and watch on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel. If you are listening, we are very cognizant of that fact, and we will, or listening only, and we're cognizant of that fact, and we'll talk you through it.
Exactly. Every year, try to streamline it more and more for those who just want to listen. And this one's going to be pretty light in terms of just want to get think of this as a 101. If this is exactly Knicks Film School, this is your introduction to what that all means. So figure if we're going to start somewhere, we might as well start with key terms. And for some of you, this is going to be, well, I already know this. And for others, it's going to be a nice little lesson. So start with a cap hold. What is a cap hold? Well, that is the amount of money that is temporarily assigned to a team's free agents, singular or plural, based on the previous year's salary. So for example, Precious Achiuwa, he made $6 million last year. He's going to have a cap hold that should be, I believe, 190%. That is his cap hold. He's not under contract, but that is the amount where the Knicks, if they keep his cap hold, is on the books. A roster charge. Well, that is the amount that is temporarily billed to each team in free agency when they have fewer than 12 players under contract. Cap holds can take place of roster charges. So, for example, the Knicks right now have what could effectively be 10 guaranteed contracts. As a result, if they cleared everyone else, everyone that has cap hold was instantly gone, then the Knicks would have 2 roster charges added to them. Those roster charges are the equivalent of a rookie's salary. And what is a rookie salary? It would be someone who was taken in the second round. It'd be like $1.2 million bare minimum. So roster charges more apply to teams that have cap space, which the Knicks will not have. And more on that in just a moment. There are 4 types of exceptions that are available to teams. First is the room exception. That is a specific salary slot that is granted to teams that operate below the salary cap. That means any team that has cap space or chooses to go the cap space route is eligible for the room exception. They are not eligible for the other exceptions. Another example of an exception, the biannual exception, or as you might see, spelled BAE or the Bay. It's a salary slot granted to teams that operate above the salary cap, but below the first apron. And this is an exception that is given to teams once every 2 years. So if you use it in 2025, you can't use it in 2026. And there's the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, the NTMLE for short. That is a salary slot granted to teams that operate above the salary cap, but below the first apron. And then there's the taxpayer mid-level exception. So this is for teams that will be in the tax. That is the TMLE, and that is a salary slot granted to teams that operate above the salary cap, but below the second apron. So the non-taxpayer, you're hard capped at the first apron. The taxpayer, you're hard capped at the second apron. Might be hard to visualize this. It makes sense as to why that would be the case. So I figured, let's throw some numbers out. So the salary cap, the projected salary cap for the 2025-26 NBA season is $154,647,000. So this means that if you have less than that, congratulations, you can find a way to create cap space. Pretty much one team, maybe a few others are going to go down this path, most likely. And that one team would be the Brooklyn Nets, not the Knicks.
No.
Then there is the luxury tax. The luxury tax is $187,895,000. Any team that is above that threshold is paying a luxury tax. There are some teams that never, ever want to pay a luxury tax. There's some teams that just don't care and are comfortable paying it frequently. The luxury tax, it's not a penalty for fans. If teams want to spend, they should spend. The only penalty is financial. Above that is the first apron. That is $195,945,000. And above that is the second apron. It's $207,824,000. So there's no there's a financial penalty for all of these. And as you keep going up and up, you spend more in taxes. But at a certain point, you can't go above the second apron or else you have risk to your future draft equity. So really think of the second apron as if we're spending the whole season above it and don't duck below it at the end of the season, that's your move. You used it once. You're probably not going to be able to reset it for another 4 years or so. So if you're going to use it, that's probably going to be the peak of your team. you don't want to use it in a season where it's not your peak. So a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves, it's easy to see why when they went over the second apron, how that could be categorized as that was their peak opportunity to winning a championship if they're trying to spend money. It doesn't mean that they can't be a contender, but they went in to try to do the best they could financially. It was this past season. They made it to the Western Conference Finals again. There can only be one winner. Unfortunately for them, it's not them. So the question for the Knicks is where they fit into this. And the Knicks are going to slot in right in between the first apron and the second apron. I've thrown a lot out there, so I'll pause there. John, what are your thoughts?
I think it's probably a good time to point out that, and I don't know how much you're going to get into this here, but we have been talking, again, for maybe some of our newer listeners or viewers, we've been talking for, it feels like years, like multiple years, about how the Knicks have been planning it out so that like they are trying to avoid going over the second apron for as long as possible. And this is the first, and last summer, we should also note, going over the second apron was not an option because once they made the Mikal Bridges trade, they were not allowed to go over the second apron for reasons that I don't know if you want to get into, or we don't really need to get into. But it's one of the restrictions of how the Knicks acquired Bridges is that they couldn't go over the second apron. So, but this is the first summer, and that's why I love how you did with this graphic, putting the Knicks as like in this general area, first, second apron. This is the first summer where it's possible that they could go over the second apron. And I think one of the interesting questions this summer will be if they make moves that put them over that apron or that restrict them from going over that apron.
Exactly. So let's look at the current roster for the 2025-26 season. And of course, this roster does not have a head coach as things stand. And I'm going with the lineup that the Knicks most recently played. So you've got Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Mitchell Robinson. That starting five is all under contract. Then you have Tyler Kolek, Deuce McBride, Josh Hart, Pacome Dadier, and Ariel Hukporti. Hukporti has a team option. And then you have PJ Tucker, who has a team option and it's non-guaranteed. So the difference being if the team option is picked up for Tucker, then he can still have that contract be non-guaranteed prior to January 10th, 2026. So he would, if he's still under that contract, he would earn the prorated amount. So for every day, it's, if there are 174 days or so in the NBA season, if he's on the team for 80 of them, for example, 75, let's say, because 80 might be past the deadline. Let's say it's 75. It would be his salary times, and then parentheses, 75 divided by 174, close parentheses. That's the amount of money that he would be owed, and that would count towards the Knicks cap sheet. But I digress. That's what the roster looks like at this very moment. Now, there's some thoughts of, well, what if the Knicks got below the first apron? As we mentioned, the non-taxpayer mid-level exception is something that you could have if you got below the first apron. Well, that is worth $14,104,000 in this upcoming season. It's going to be really hard for them to get to that. And we'll explain why. There's also access to the biennial exception, which would be $5,134,000. So the thought process here is, well, what if you signed a player or multiple players to these exceptions and then you still did your thing and you made the money all work out? The other advantage of being below the first apron is you can receive more money coming in a trade than you send out. And you can acquire a free agent via sign and trade. So any free agent that's out there, you can acquire them. Their team can sign and trade their rights away. One example could be Nickeil Alexander-Walker of the Timberwolves. If the Timberwolves signed and traded him to the Knicks using the non-taxpayer mid-level exception at $14.1 million, that they could do that. That is some prevailing thought. And I'm here to tell you that from the Timberwolves side, they could probably get away with it because they'll be under the second apron and signing and trading a player away you need to be under the second apron. They'll try to make sure that they are under that because they were over it last year. And there'd be harsh penalties if they were over it again this year. But for the Knicks, they're then hard capped at the first apron. So the question is, could the Knicks even get below the first apron?
Real quick, to make it explicitly clear, it doesn't, if you're thinking, well, get $1 under the first apron and then acquire the player via sign and trade. You can't do that.
Exactly.
If whatever your salary is going to be after the sign and trade is completed and after you acquire that salary, that is your salary for the purposes of the restriction that we're talking about here. So if that puts you above the first apron, well, then you can't do the deal because if you acquire a player via sign and trade, you cannot be above the first apron at any point in time.
Yep. A hard cap is not a loophole. You cannot get around it. It is set in stone under no circumstance. And that. So if we look at the projected lineup for the Knicks for next year, if they were to decline PJ Tucker's team option and non-guarantee him and pick up the team option for Ariel Hukporti, just doing that, you have Karl-Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, Mitchell Robinson, Deuce McBride, Combe Dadier, Tyler Kolek, and Hukporti. All of those players add up to $196.3 million. The first apron is $195.9 million, which means that without moving a finger, the Knicks are already above the first apron. So how they'd be able to get below that and do something like you see here, which is, oh, congratulations. The Knicks were able to clear a spot for the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. Yippee, that's $14.1 million. Well, how did they do it? And how do they have to solve for the roster? Well, it means, PJ Tucker not coming back. It means Ariel Hukporti not coming back in any fashion. And it means you have traded Josh Hart's salary for nothing in return. And on top of that, so now we've got Towns, OG, Brunson, Bridges, the players signed with the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, Mitch, Deuce, Dadier, Kolek. That's 9 players. Okay. In order to meet the criteria that's needed, you have to hit 14 players at some point. Let's assume the Knicks go into the season with 14 players. The amount of space that they have, they basically have to sign 5 players to a rookie exception contract this summer. And you can't just find an undrafted free agent off the street and sign them to a rookie exception. It has to be a player that you have either drafted in the second round or you have traded for their rights to then sign. So the unrealistic nature of being able to get below the first apron, the amount of pieces that would have to be moved just to accommodate this is so extreme. And again, we talked about not going to say absolutes, but so much would have to go into getting below the first apron that it doesn't make sense why the Knicks would do this. Well, if anything, they would not want to be hard capped at the first apron because then they also will have less salary to play with this season to make a move if they wanted to keep making additional moves.
The other part of it is, needless to say, there would have to be a player that they would be seeking that they would want to spend this $14.1 million on. And again, we're not speaking in absolutes here, but just looking at the free agent class, that obvious player, for me at least, is not out there. I'm sure someone listening to this, but what about this player? Maybe they would take that amount of money. You never know. The only thing I will say, again, no absolutes. If you're thinking, well, Jeremy just said dumping Josh Hart, or pick another play, dump Mitchell Robinson. But again, that wouldn't get you under the level. It has to be Hart because Hart makes that much money. But let's say you want to talk about Mitchell Robinson and Deuce McBride and maybe a rookie salary or last year's rookie salary, whoever you want to talk about, dumping money. There is a possibility that you're going to get something of value, whether it be a draft pick it'd have to be draft assets, and that might entice you to do it. The problem there is that, as Jeremy said, there's only one team with cap space, and I would be, call it mildly surprised if the Knicks sent Josh Hart across the river to go play for the Brooklyn Nets. there are teams that have sizable exceptions that can be used to acquire, a player in this fashion. I don't know that there's any exceptions large enough out there. Again, I would have to look, off the top of my head. If there are any, it's very few to even accommodate a salary of the size of like Hart's.
Right. And to your point, let's say it's not Josh Hart. Let's say it's Mitch and Deuce. Could you trade Mitch into another team's non-taxpayer mid-level exception? Yes, you could, because it used to be that the non-taxpayer mid-level exception was not, you couldn't trade for a player. You just had to sign a free agent. Now you can do that with the taxpayer mid-level, not the non-taxpayer. The taxpayer mid-level, which is a lot smaller, you cannot acquire a player's rights via trade. It can only be a free agent signing. So all of this to say is the amount of hoops that the Knicks would have to jump through just to be able to open up space. And I mean, this, if you look at this, it's 7 guys that are on rookie contracts. That's really tough to do when you are trying to field a contender.
Even if you got like some amazing player to sign for $14 million, which I think I saw a report yesterday that Tyler Kolek is maybe assumed to be about to sign a $50 million a year extension. So just like Tyler Kolek's a very nice player, but like if he's getting $50 million, like in this economy, what are you getting for $14 million? There's not much of a team left here, especially if we're thinking about we want to be adding depth and not taking away depth. So I think we made this point pretty clear.
Absolutely. So here again, the team as it stands at the moment with PJ Tucker not in the picture, but Huck Porty in the picture. You've got $11.5 million in second apron space, and you have 10 players under contract. And you might be thinking, well, that's ample space to do things. And it is, and it also isn't. And we're going to show you why the math basically just adds up faster than you would think. But very quickly, it's the liminal apron space of in between the first apron and the second apron, but not above or below either.
Jeremy, I've never seen that word before in my life.
You've never seen liminal space?
Now I have.
Okay, yeah, like the socks in your dresser, they live in a liminal space. It's just a void where, that's where they exist. That's their home. They don't stray out of it unless they're taken out or placed in.
Well, that's where they live. Do because I'm always missing socks, but I digress.
Well, the sock monster just steals them. So you have my sympathies. But how can the Knicks stay above the first apron, but also below the second apron? Well, what they can do is they can use that taxpayer mid-level exception. They cannot go above the second apron if they use the taxpayer mid-level exception. And here's what they also cannot do. They can't use the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, as we talked about, the more expensive one. They can't use the biannual exception. They cannot use the Jericho Sims traded player exception, which is very small anyway, but any traded player exception that was used, and to be clear, what's traded player exception for those who don't know? Let's say you send out salary and you either don't get any money back or you're able to offset it in a different way. Congratulations. It's a free salary slot for you to use. The only issue is that if it was in the previous season and you use it in the season that is upcoming, then you are hard capping yourself at the first apron. So if you see Knicks of a Jericho Sims traded player exception, just ignore it. It's not going to be used. And you can't, as mentioned, acquire a free agency via sign and trade. You can send one out, but you cannot acquire, like you can send one of your own guys out, but you cannot acquire another team's free agent as part of a sign and trade where the other team signs that player and then instantly trades them over. So why should the Knicks stay below the second apron, right? I mean, there's no reason for them to stay below it. They could go above it. Well, the Knicks need more than a coaching change, an internal lineup change, and or player development in order to be a better version of themselves. It's difficult for the Knicks to improve and also go above the second apron next year. Why is that? Well, for starters, you're unlikely to add talent while also shedding salary. It just doesn't happen a whole lot. It could, but then if you need to add up the salary in order to make it work, then congratulations, you're adding multiple salaries together. And then you are hard capping yourself at the second apron because, oh, by the way, if you do that, you're hard capped at the second apron. So you can't use an exception and go above the second apron. So you can't add money. You can't renegotiate a player's salary. Like the Knicks can't give any of their players this upcoming season who are already under contract more money because you'd have to use cap space, and the Knicks won't have cap space. So that option's out. So the fixed costs that you see for players under contract, those are going to stay fixed unless they get traded away. You can't trade for a player and then extend them because that extension wouldn't kick in until the 26-27 season. So it's not like you bring someone in-house and then you give them more money. It's the year after where it would matter. So that doesn't help you this year. So the questions are, how do you go above the second apron if you're the Knicks? As you saw, the Knicks have $11.5 or so million in second apron space by the plan that we talked about. How would you even go above that? Well, the two ways that you could go above it, because as we just mentioned, you can't use you can't use the taxpayer mid-level exception and then go above the second apron. So adding money in free agency doesn't really help you. So there are two ways essentially the Knicks could go above this. Number one is they could bring back a player like Precious Achiuwa to a similar salary of $6 million or greater, right? The theory of, hey, give Precious $8 million. Give Cameron Payne a little over his max of $4 million. Suddenly, that's $12 million right there. And if you wanted, for the regular season, what you could do is then you could trade that player for the amount that they are earning or less than that by the 2026 deadline. So if you gave, Precious Achiuwa, and again, this is just for an example. If you gave Precious Achiuwa $8 million, and you saw a player that you really liked who was earning $7,999,999. You could do that and still be above the second apron and wouldn't have a problem because you're going down in salary. But the likelihood of the Knicks doing that, slim.
Just to be clear, I want to make sure we're not conflating two things. Essentially, what you're saying is the only way for any team to go above the second apron is to re-sign their own free agents and go above that number. There's really functionally no other way to do it.
Well, there's there's one other way, but you're absolutely right. You're taking what's in-house and saying we'll inflate the cost in-house because if we take the cost from out of our house, it's actually going to restrict us from what we can do. That's if you want to do this. Do you know what the second option for how you can go above the second apron is? Off
the top of my head, I don't.
Okay.
But I want to make one more point. What you were talking about with the trade, that's the second part of this, which is like, well, why would you willingly go above the second apron? Again, not saying the Knicks would want to do this or would even be thinking along these lines, but one theory could be you want to just have that fungible salary on the book so you could then flip it for something, again, later in the season that makes a little bit less money. What's the second reason?
So the second way that you could go about it is by adding a draft pick.
There you go.
And the Timberwolves did this last year. So basically what you do if you were the Knicks is you would trade for a high 2025 draft pick. But the Knicks don't have the assets to get it done. Because the Timberwolves, I believe, traded swap rights for 2030, their 2030 first round pick, and then their entire 2031 first round pick. So that's a time where you could say, hey, let's bring in money because we know this is the team. So we're trying to add a good, talented prospect now. But the Knicks aren't able to do that because they can't trade their 2032 pick because they traded their 2031 pick for Mikal Bridges. So the odds of the Knicks going above the second apron to begin with are slim because they'd have to do it one of these two ways, both of which seem pretty unlikely. So if we're saying, based on all of this information, they're unlikely to go below the first apron and above the second apron, how do we fill out this team? And is there a reason to stay below the second apron? Yes, the financial component. It's the use it or lose it, where it's like you want to keep pushing it off as long as you can. So you want to avoid it until, as mentioned, you're that peak version of your team. The Knicks next year are unlikely to be the peak version financially. That's when they would go over the second apron. So the philosophy would be, okay, 2025, 26, you're below the second apron. And then 26-27, that year, maybe you're more likely to go above the second apron. But for the 25-26 season, let's talk about second apron space. So, as mentioned, I'm going to go through a few different scenarios to show how quickly that money gets spent. If you're the Knicks, you've got $11.5 million. You have 10 in second apron space. The Knicks have 10 active players, as we've talked about. Now assume they pick up PJ Tucker's option. So it's his $3,468,960 salary plus the 10 players, and you're getting rid of everyone else. So now you have a roster charge, and that roster charge is $1,272,869. Adding up PJ Tucker's salary and the roster charge, that's $4.7 million. I'm going to start trying to condense the numbers just because I don't want to make it too confusing.
4.7. Yeah.
So you went from 11.5 to 4.7. Now, this is where it gets confusing because as we talked about with that PJ Tucker salary, it's non-guaranteed. So you could theoretically be off the hook for a portion of it before the deadline date. So that's a dead cap hit. So you have to keep working backwards. You have to keep thinking by the end of the 25-26 season, making sure we will be under the second apron no matter what. So let's assume they keep him for the whole year just because the math is kinder to us that way. The Knicks had 11.5, and then you add PJ Tucker, or you have PJ Tucker's salary and the minimum roster charge, right? Like the lowest we could possibly pay another player who we drafted with the 50th pick, for example. Now we have $6.8 million in second apron space, but we only have 12 players under contract. We need to get to 14. And again, the Knicks last year, they didn't get to 14 until the absolute latest they could have. For the sake of simple math, because people's heads are already probably spinning, and I don't blame them. This stuff is complicated. Let's just assume the Knicks signed 14 players by day one of the regular season. It's just an easier way to think about it. So you've got the 10 players in PJ Tucker. That's like $199.8 million. You've got the one rookie exception, which is the same cost as the roster charge. That's $1.3 million. And then let's say the Knicks signed 2 minimum players, right? Let's say they signed Landry Shamet and DeLon Wright. Welcome back, guys. If they were to do that, they're at 14 players, which means that they are now only at $2.2 million in second apron space. That's not enough to use the taxpayer mid-level exception. That's not even enough to sign a veteran minimum for the whole season. So we're trying to figure out, okay, maybe there are other ways for us to be a little bit better with our money. Maybe that's not the right way to go. So assume the same thing in a different context. Scenario 2. Knicks have 10 players. PJ Tucker, they bring him back on that same salary, and they've got the rookie exception guy. But instead of signing DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet, they sign only one of those players. That gets them to 13 players. And ultimately, it leads them to about $4.5 million in second apron space. They would still need to sign one more player, but also that's not enough for them to sign someone to the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is that $5+ million salary slot. So we're still not getting potentially where we need to go. So then another thought is, okay, let's not bring PJ Tucker back on that contract, because also the amount he could make next year, I'll just go back for a second. He's making $3.5 million, right, John, on the contract that he's currently on that's non-guaranteed. If the Knicks wiped his money clean and brought him back on a minimum salary, the cap hit would be $2.3 million instead. So basically, just by saying, PJ, we are wiping you off the books and we're bringing you back, the Knicks would save about $1.2 million.
Yeah, 1.1.
So it makes sense if you want to keep creating second apron space to then not have PJ Tucker come back on that salary if this is the direction we're going. So the Knicks have their 10 players. PJ Tucker's not one of them. They have the 2 rookie exception charges, we'll say. So they They sign the guy who they take 50th, and then let's say they finally after a year. Well, no, they can't do undrafted free agents because undrafted free agents cannot be signed to the rookie exception. They have to have been drafted.
That's right.
So let's say they bring over, finally, welcome to America, Rokas Jokubaitis. Probably not going to happen, but play along. It's those 10 players. It's the 50th pick. It's Rokas, and then it's PJ Tucker to a minimum salary and one of DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet. That gets us to 14 players. That only gives us $4.4 million in spending. So we've tried to be a little bit more creative, and we still don't even have enough to get a player signed to the taxpayer mid-level exception. Because as a reminder, that full amount would have the Knicks go above the second apron, which they can't do because using that salary slot would hard cap them at the second apron. So the math is not mathing there. So there's another way which we can go about this, which is 10 players, the guys that we saw. And then what the Knicks do is they have our 10 players. They say we have 2 rookie exceptions and 2 veteran minimums, right? I believe that's the difference here. Or yep, do that. Or in this case, I guess it would be the 1. I think the math might have been a little... Try to double check my work. Either way, if they were to do this, I think it's 10 roster players, actually 2 rookie exceptions, and then working it out. Yeah, you're able to do that. You get to 202. I'm just trying to, I think there's the one. Apologies. There's a lot of dense math here.
We can fast track it. The point is,
exactly. They would there's a way for them to create second apron space that also has the taxpayer mid-level, and I will show you exactly how they can do that. But let's go to the free agents that they have to deal with for the next 2 seasons. This year, for potential free agents, Precious Achiuwa, Cameron Payne, Landry Shamet, DeLon Wright, PJ Tucker. The first 4 names, definitively free agents. No question about it. PJ Tucker may not be. 2026 free agent, Mikal Bridges, Mitchell Robinson, and Ariel Hukporti, most likely. I'm going to stop there because I've thrown a lot out. So, John, I want to get your thoughts on everything I've just debriefed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main takeaway is that if the Knicks keep their roster as is, in terms of the big pieces, again, we're not talking about a PJ Tucker here. Let's assume, as you did during the second couple of looks at the ramifications of the cap and everything, that PJ Tucker, they wave bye-bye to him, so they get a little bit more flexibility there. Like, it's basically having to beg, borrow, and steal to get, and I understand we're not there yet, to get even that taxpayer mid-level exception number, which, again, I know we're not getting into yet, but like, that's only $5 million. And I'm sure at some point we're going to go through the players who were signed for the taxpayer mid-level exception last year. Spoiler alert, most of them were not terribly helpful to their teams. So basically, it's a very long way of saying, if you're going to kind of play things safe, it's going to be hard to make any kind of a, hashtag meaningful improvement to your team. That's my big takeaway so far.
Exactly. I think that's very fair. So in order to think of 25 and 26 and all that, we do need to keep in mind the future. Like, it's one thing to just focus on the year that's upcoming, but we've got to think about the contracts coming after that. So for the 2026 free agents, Mikal Bridges, he can sign for 140% of this upcoming year's salary. So that would be $24.9 million. And then you multiply that by 140%. So the first year of his extension in 2026-27 would be about $34.9 million. Mitchell Robinson, same thing. He can sign for 140% of this upcoming year's salary. He's making about $13 million in the 2025-26 season. 13 million times 140% of that. That would be a first year salary of 18.1. Ariel Hukporti, he can sign between the minimum salary, which would be 1 year of service, and around $14 million. And he can only receive 5% raises because the Knicks don't have bird rights on him because they used a minimum contract to sign him. So keeping all that in mind, There's one thing that's really been pressing, and I have been thinking about this for a long time. But before I do that, I'm going to just show a graphic, and this is going to be the current salaries the Knicks have on the books, the projected, and the max. The projected and the max are about the same. The only difference is imagine if Huck Porty were not included. You don't really have to focus on the current because it's really more for show. And I even hid some of the players, like I hid Precious Achiuwa. There should be $11 million there. But
how dare you?
It's just not. Sorry, it's just not there. So this is again for show of what the numbers look like if you were to mix and match. But we don't have to focus too much on this because it's truly that projected amount that we want to care about. But let's talk about Jalen Brunson and how Jalen Brunson is truly a saint and deserves a statue for many reasons, but above all, because of the extension that he took. Jalen Brunson could have entered unrestricted free agency this summer, and he could have been eligible for a big contract. And that would have started at $46.4 million. Now, let's say Jalen Brunson did not take the extension and the Knicks did everything that they did prior to this. And then he signs this new contract this summer. Hooray, that's great. Welcome back, Cap. He's here. Well, that means that just with the 10 players on the roster, the Knicks would only have about $64,000 of second apron space, which means without moving a single contract off the books, they would have to then fill the back end of their roster with 4 slots, which means that they would in all likelihood be above the second apron. So they're above the second apron in the 25-26 season, which comes with all of these headaches. And now he would be saying, all right, guys, this is your shot. This is the opportunity that we have to win.
Yeah.
Because in 2026-27, well, if Mikal Bridges and Mitchell Robinson agreed to their extensions, the Knicks are absolutely above the second apron, which means the Knicks have now been above the second apron in back-to-back years, which means that their pick 7 years in the future would be 30th in the draft out of 30 teams, although at that point it might even be 32nd because there are probably 2 expansion teams. It would be dead last. So you're putting a whole lot of money into a team that isn't really able to do a lot of things to tinker around it. So I'm shouting out Brunson because what the Knicks were able to do or are able to do has transformed dramatically. I cannot overstate this with how important getting a top 10 NBA player on a non-top 10 salary, not even a top 20 salary.
Yeah, it's I'll look.
Not even a top 30 salary to my knowledge. Yeah. Like, it is staggering. It was unprecedented. It shows how committed he is to this team. And with this new CBA, how the avenues to building a contender around him matter. If you were to have given him this contract, if you're the Knicks, your window, I don't want to say it's closed because that wouldn't be fair, but it has dramatically reduced its opening because of this one deal. But we're blessed as Knicks fans.
As of now, Jalen Brunson is going to have the 48th highest salary in the league next year. And when you consider some rookie extensions that are probably going to kick in, it might be outside the top 50.
It probably will be.
Yeah.
And that's just, I'll never not be appreciative of this. So imagine with the Brunson extension now in play that you have these other costs, right? If you weren't to extend Bridges or Mitch, you're probably committing to the second apron. If you're keeping all these other guys, if you're keeping Cat, you're keeping OG, you're keeping Brunson, of course, you keep Josh Hart. If you bring back if you're just running it back, the collision course that you're on for the second apron, going above it in 26-27, it feels inevitable. You'd have to make some other move. If you were to extend Mikal Bridges and not Mitchell Robinson, let's say you move Mitchell Robinson for no money, Okay, you could do that. You've extended Bridges, you've wiped Mitch's money off the books. Great. But also, why? Because now what you've done without even adding to the back end of your roster, you've got, and this is in 26, 27. You've got Bridges on this extension, but you have only $10.4 million in first apron space. So that means you still don't have enough to sign a non-taxpayer mid-level guy, because if it's $14 million this summer, it's going to be more than that in the next summer. And then you have $23.5 million in second apron space. So you might as well have just kept Mitch, because you could extend him and you'd have salary that works, because it's harder to add money and all of that. So what you're seeing on the screen right now, the idea of keeping Bridges and extending him and trading Mitch for no money in return, makes zero sense. You don't want to do that. If you do trade Mitchell Robinson, you need to bring money back. And if you were to do that, if you were to extend everyone, you extend Bridges, you extend Mitch, the minimum costs you're looking at, you're still likely to be above the second apron in 26, 27. So again, 25, 26, you're below the second apron. And the current plan, as things stand, would then be to go above the second apron in 26, 27. I'll stop there for a second. What are your thoughts, John?
I mean, I think, again, it all makes sense. They're trying to stay below the second apron next year, and they are planning to go above the second apron the following year. The big question is, how much maneuvering can they do in the next 12 months to make it worth it? You know, or maybe not worth it's the wrong, or to get the most,
bang for your buck.
Bang for the buck, juice out of the squeeze, whatever you want to say.
Of course. So I want to talk about Mikal Bridges. And this is what I was teasing of the one big thing. And John, I've been so good about this, man. I have not uttered a peep this whole season about Mikal Bridges' contract.
No, you've been very good.
Okay. OG Anunoby last summer signed for a little under $40 million in year one. And that was the equivalent of 26% of the salary cap. Mikal Bridges, the projected salary cap, the year that he would be a free agent, summer of 2026, is $170 million. If he were to take the extension at $34.9 million, he's earning 20.5% of the salary cap. So OG, who earns in that first year 26%, the difference here being Bridges would be earning 20.5. That is a gap of over 5%. Now, they'd be different ages, right? OG, a little younger than Bridges, the defensive impact stronger for OG, perhaps the offensive impact historically has been on Bridges' side. But if I'm Mikal Bridges, perhaps I'm thinking, I show up for work every single day. I play the most minutes in the NBA. Why am I settling? Why am I agreeing? Just because I went to Villanova? Just because I'm friends with Jalen Brunson? And for context, if you were to take the percentage of the salary cap that OG signed for and apply it to Mikal Bridges, his year one salary would be $44.3 million, which means that in year one alone, he would be sacrificing almost $10 million. And then if you expand that across the entire rest of his contract, right? You sign Mikal Bridges to a max extension. He's earning from 2025 to the end of the 2030 season, $181. But if he were to not be extended and then become a free agent and sign for the exact same percentage that OG signed with his deal, theoretically speaking, of course, he would be eligible for $223.5 million over that same span of 5 seasons, which means, John, that with that in mind, Mikal Bridges would be passing up $42.4 million over 5 years.
Well,
that is a lot of money for a player to say, I'm so committed to winning that I am comfortable taking this chunk of change away from myself. And maybe he does. Maybe he agrees to the extension after all. James Edwards III, congratulations to him. He got the article out before I was able to do it. He hit on a lot of these, the same exact topic. Does Bridges want to stay? Of course, Tibbs no longer there. Is he able to be in a better system, one that makes him less of a spot up guy? But does that also give him the opportunity to make more money? Is there now more pressure on the Knicks because they're basically saying, well, if we keep Mikal Bridges around, we have to go above the second apron in 2026, 27, because we can't lose him, because if he walks away, it's not like we gain cap space because we've got all these other salaries. So this is why the Knicks are in between a bit of a rock and a hard place with Bridges if he doesn't take the extension. And it's not me saying, hey, Mikal Bridges out the door, see ya. But it's like, listen, the way the Knicks have operated, team control has been important to them. And if they cannot get team control, if we're talking about Julius Randle, with the sides being so far apart that they didn't even broach the conversation, really, that's what the reporting was at the time. If you're in a similar spot and now every dollar is even more important because you're truly capitalizing on your prime, all I am saying is if he doesn't take the extension, if you're the Knicks, it's something that you have to think about. It would be malpractice if you did not think about doing it. Not advising them, just stating where the money lies.
I completely agree with you that if the Knicks and Mikal Bridges were not able to come to an agreement on an extension this summer, it would, to me at least, be writing on the wall that Mikal Bridges' time in this organization is probably not for long. The only thing I will add in regards to him leaving $42.4 million on the table, he'd be leaving that on the table, presuming that there would be someone out there who would be willing to pay him a 4-year, $223 million contract. And based on the season that he just had, I think it is at least fair to wonder how if there's even one team out in the league who views Mikal Bridges as a player who should be earning an average of $50 million a year, even.
But the thing is, with the cap going up,
no, I know
it's not absurd, and I think
it's not absurd.
It's also not even really that much of an overpay, especially because the contract he's on right now is good. But if we're taking last season, and if we're also incorporating the Tibbs aspect of it all, where he wasn't quite as empowered, or perhaps it wasn't working for him, you could say,
I get all that.
After a down year, sure. But if another coach comes in here and Mikal Bridges starts playing exceptionally well, then that amount, the percentage equivalent to OG, is not laughable. It's pretty in line with what we're talking about.
And I think, again, if fully actualizing Cat on the offensive end is line item number one for the new coach, I think fully actualizing Mikal Bridges on the offensive end is probably line item 1B. Mm-hmm. So I think there will be a priority in the organization to get Mikal Bridges to look like the player that they thought they traded for all of the time, or at least most of the time, as opposed to some percentage of the time that is probably closer to 50 in one direction or the other than 100. Look, I'm again, the numbers are going crazy. That should go without saying. I'm still slightly skeptical about what Bridges' market would be, but again, never say never, and all it takes is one asshole.
True. I just don't think a year ago that level of skepticism, especially given everything. Right. So I just think we're seeing the adverse effects of a down year with someone who wasn't as empowered, but we'll see what happens. Of course, if you're the Knicks, maybe this is an even better reason for him to extend. But maybe if you're Bridges, you're saying, no, I want to bet on myself with a new coach. So to be determined. Hopefully he would sign the extension, but if he doesn't, you got to at least consider. And the most important factor, we just talked about this with Mikal Bridges signing the extension. You're probably above the second apron. If he doesn't sign, the extension, you're keeping him. You're definitely above the second apron. If he doesn't sign the extension, and but the Knicks want to keep Bridges and not be above the second apron. You'd have to dump salary. It's a whole thing. And as mentioned, the rules change when you're above the second apron. And that's where the Knicks are headed if they keep everything about the same. And that's what primarily this is. This podcast is just running it back. It's not something I would imagine they do, but it's purely this is what's in front of us. Imagine if they did this. Imagine if you got a head coach and you just did the same thing or made minor tweaks. How would you go about it? So all the guaranteed players return. Ariel Hukporty's team option picked up. PJ Tucker's team option is declined. Let's also have his contract be non-guaranteed. Then the Knicks sign a veteran of their choosing. The cap hit would be the equivalent of 2 years of service, even though the cash would be greater than that. Let's say, again, PJ Tucker signs for that amount. He'd make more for cash, but his cap hit would be less. And let's say the Knicks sign Kevin McCullough Jr. He's not eligible for the rookie exception. He'd also have 1 year of service under his belt. The roster at that point, with all of these things happening, would stand at 13 players, as we've talked about. The mandate is that the Knicks would have to be at 14 players. So if you just had the 13 players here and you signed, again, McCullough to that, it's about $2 million. The Knicks would have $7.2 million in second apron space. So they'd have one roster spot and $7.2 million to spend with it. And it just so happens that if you use that final roster spot on the taxpayer mid-level exception, that would be about $5.7 million. You'd have 14 players, and it'd give you a little less than $1.5 million in second apron space. Using that taxpayer mid-level exception, you would be hard capped at the second apron. So you'd have about $1.5 million to work with.
Which is more than they had last year.
It is. It's also fungible because if you took that NBA veteran and you put him on a non-guaranteed contract, you could waive him in January and then wait 14 days to sign someone and then save some money there and then sign a player to a 10-day contract. And then once that 10-day contract's up, you could wait another 14 days and then sign someone to a minimum contract for the rest of the year. So you can play with that number. The hard cap is official, but there's some flexibility with how much you can deviate from that roughly $1.5 million. So this is essentially setting us up for what will be our next conversation, which is the taxpayer mid-level exception. But to close the loop on this one, in conclusion, expect the Knicks to stay above the first apron, but below the second apron. The team's limited to the taxpayer mid-level exception and any minimum signings. The Knicks need to either extend Mitchell Robinson or turn him into what we at Knicks Film School called continuous soup. And continuous soup, or it's like a perpetual stew. You basically, if you're going to lose that salary slot, you got to keep it going. So if it's not Mitchell Robinson, it's someone else who then you keep the money chain going. It doesn't ever stop. You just keep going and going until you're able to hold on to that money for as long as you can. Mikal Bridges' extension, it may not be as guaranteed as people think. Hopefully he signs it. But if he doesn't extend, that will have significant ramifications on the Knicks books. The second apron is indeed lurking for that 26-27 season. The Knicks can largely run it back and still sign a player with the taxpayer mid-level exception, as mentioned. Is that the best option? Bluntly, no, I don't think it is. Will the Knicks do more than that? Bluntly, yeah, I think they will. And if you're looking for further improvements, uncomfortable conversations are going to need to be had. And that's the thing. As we talk through all of the salaries and the rosters, Shams Charania himself even said the Knicks will look to be aggressive. And I understand that there is a feeling of the Knicks don't have picks and they're trapped, they're stuck. I guarantee you they're not. There are creative ways for them to get what they need or look for what they need. There are ways for them to find value with the players that they have on their team and connect with other trade partners to effectively try to get what they want. Is it a guarantee that they will get exactly what they want? Of course not. But this idea and this lust over draft picks because they could be anything. They could be. They could also not be as great as people think that they are. Just because the future is the future doesn't mean that they're going to be good. But all this is to set us up for the fact that if we want to talk about this team truly changing and what that means under a new head coach, because the philosophies could adjust a little bit, saying, hey, head coach, you got to be happy with all the players that we have. That's probably an unlikely scenario. It's probably going to be a little bit of, I want to work with these players, but also I have my own system that is compatible. But perhaps as a team, we could do this with that. So just keep this in mind, friends, that there are going to need to be talks about certain players. And the way that I view it is everyone not named Jalen Brunson is available for the right price. And if you disagree with that, I'm trying not to speak in absolutes. That's just my opinion. If you disagree with that, that's fine. I just don't think the Knicks are in a position to do anything differently than that.
That was great. I will just add very briefly, like, I think everybody should just pay careful attention to all the reporting that is out there regarding this season and the reporting that has come out over the course of the season. And if you think that, forget the X's and O's part of it. If you think that a new coach is going to fix everything that ails this team, that's including like locker room personality stuff, like, you know, whatever Josh Hart was talking about when he kept bringing up agendas, whatever, players, thinking, Karl-Anthony Towns to see the problem on defense here and whatever else you want to go with. I mean, you can believe that. You can believe that. I tend to think that just because the organization has decided that they want/need a different voice, as they said, guiding the team, guiding the locker room as a conduit between the roster and the front office. I do not think for 1 second that means that they are going to, that I do not read that as, oh, they're totally cool with this roster and that we fired the coach because we believe in the roster. I don't take it that way. I take it as they are going to be aggressive in seeing if there are any ways out there to improve the roster. And I completely agree with you, Jeremy, about there's one player on this roster that I would say is like 100% safe. And I want to correct myself because a few people have asked me over the last like several weeks or whatever about players going in, going out. And I've always kind of put like Josh Hart in the, maybe not in the Brunson category, but like right alongside Brunson in terms of because of their relationship and because of how much he, I think, means, on the court, in the locker room, the whole, he's Josh Hart. I think I'm going to back away from that. I'm not suggesting that Josh Hart's going to get traded. I'm not suggesting that they want to trade him. I think we should all be ready to keep an open mind. And if I was going to put someone just below Brunson, I would probably change it to OG Anunoby, just for whatever that's worth.
Sure. With Hart, I think two things can be true at the same time. That the Knicks may not be looking to move Josh Hart, but they also would be comfortable moving him if it was for the right deal or involving fit for a better player.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. Okay. This was great. This was a great start to Conch season. As Jeremy said, there are going to be more of these on the way. We are going to be diving deeper into the possibilities of the mid-level exception. And the taxpayer mid-level exception. Very clear about that. Mm-hmm. 5 point whatever million is less than $14 million. And we're also going to be, just so everybody is like very clear, we are going to be going down the road of, okay, if they want to go big game hunting, like we know the names, what would that look like? And what would the ramifications be? Who would need to go out? What are the different players that could go out and all those sorts of trades? So we will get into all of that. Jeremy, I don't have anything else. Anything from you?
Yeah, the last thing I'll say, if you stuck around until the end, thank you. Like with most introductory classes, this stuff's dense. If you're feeling overwhelmed, that is a fair feeling to feel. It's a lot to go through. This is going to be the type of class where it might weed you out from the rest. If you're feeling like, oh, these are all going to be like this, I promise you, they're not. We had to eat our vegetables in order to have our dessert, and it all builds. I promise it does. So if you've gotten this far, thank you. It's going to be more fun from here. It's not going to be as painstakingly pedantic, I promise. But it's a lot, man. It's lawyer speak that's then translated a million different ways. And
yeah, but
when we get here,
it's not even vegetables, because you could trust me, there's many nights I eat dinner and I don't eat my vegetables, even though my wife yells at me that I should. I know, it is a shame on me. This is necessary because you can't understand. This is, I would argue, the most important con, because if you don't know this stuff, then you're going to be sitting there 2 weeks from now seeing some nonsense but some nonsense trade suggestion from, I don't want to say any names, but we all know the accounts out there. And we could both promise you there's a whole lot of shit that gets mentioned that there's about 18 different reasons why the thing that gets proposed is quite literally impossible or illegal. And with this knowledge, you will now not be duped into falling for those sorts of things. So
yeah,
there you go. Okay. Thank you, Jeremy. If you dig what we do here, you know what to do. Give us a nice rating, a nice review. Obviously, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts are found, or wherever your podcasts are found. And we will, be back with more fun and games before you know it. Peace out.